And tonight on The Wrap, another revelation on the raid to take out Osama bin Laden. NBC News now says Pakistani intelligence knew where bin Laden was all along. Senate Democrats vetoing the president's trade agreement. Will tell you why and who the president's surprising supporters are. Plus, Carly Fiorina says she understands the economy, but does she? Also, Christianity is in a sharp decline, and not just with millennials. And have you seen that racist interview that's bringing Democrats and Republicans together? We've got all that, plus potluck and yay and nay. This is the Daily Wrap, live from New York City. And welcome to the show. I'm Joe Concha, joined by SiriusXM radio host, columnist for Forbes.com, my co-host, Rick Unger, who's back and looking healthy.
Thank you. Feeling much better.
To his right, Philly top lawyer and America's pundit, she is Heather Hansen. And to her right, he's the editor of thewisdomdaily.com. Brad Hirschfield is back. He really is.
He really is.
Okay.
There he is.
Lots happening. Let's get right to the daily download. So now more sources are backing up the claims by Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Seymour Hersh, who says the Obama administration lied about the details of the raid to take out Osama bin Laden. NBC News now citing two intelligence sources who say someone from the Pakistani intelligence told the CIA where bin Laden was hiding a year before the raid. NBC sources also say Pakistani government officials were aware of bin Laden's location all along. Hersh says the Pakistani government has had an active role in approving and implementing the raid on bin Laden's hideout. Hersh was on MSNBC and defended his use of a single, unnamed source.
This is a very serious person in a very serious position who knows a great deal. And let me just go on, I was able to independently verify most of the items in it. Plus, I got two big major things from inside Pakistan, both from Karachi and both from Islamabad, the capital, that verify a lot of my writing. I just can't go around naming people.
Chris Hayes didn't look vexed in that or anything. Hersh says the original agreement between the Obama administration and the Pakistani government was to say bin Laden was killed by a drone in the Hindu Kush Mountains. But just after the raid, Hersh says the president decided to reveal the details of the mission carried out by SEAL Team 6.
The president went public with a speech that was prepared by the political people in the White House. Why did he go public? Because he's got an election coming the next year and he's not running so well. That's my reasonable assumption. That certainly was the assumption of the people in the operational committee. He was very angry that he broke the rules because suddenly you're confronted with a new scenario.
The Obama administration has been pushing back hard on the Hersh story. Officials still insisting that the Pakistani government had no involvement in the mission, was unaware of the attack in advance, and that bin Laden had been tracked down through his couriers, not through a reward. Rick, what do you make of these latest revelations?
Well, it's not a full endorsement of the Hersh story, but it's definitely one piece of it that now somebody else has stepped up and said it was true, this being NBC News. What I find kind of fascinating about it, if this is in fact true, if we did know where bin Laden was, and if we knew it because somebody came in for the reward money or however that went down, it would suggest that we didn't find it out by using courier, following the couriers. And if that's...
Which you questioned last night, by the way.
Well, I did, yeah. And if we didn't find it out that way, then I'd like an explanation as to why we were told that the courier information was the direct result of waterboarding and other things that I would term as torture that others might say aren't. But this is what we were told was how it happened. See, it really works, that waterboarding. It works because we got the information that gave us bin Laden. Well, now it appears maybe we didn't. So I hope people don't forget that.
Let's assume it's true, what Hersh is reporting, and now NBC is stepping forward. Now the dominoes will start to fall if it is true. Why would the USA wait 1 year to kill Osama bin Laden?
Well, if you assume what they're saying is true, there were clearly negotiations going on between the U.S. and Pakistan. But there's a lot of unanswered questions. Not only does the information come from waterboarding, but there's a Dr. Afridi who's currently in jail in Pakistan for allegedly helping us to capture Osama bin Laden. He's been sentenced to 33 years. Rand Paul has argued again and again to withhold aid to Pakistan until he's been released. If this is true, then he's a scapegoat who's serving time for no good reason. So there's a lot of unanswered questions
There
here.
is an answer to your question. A year's not actually that crazy because in the time it would take not only to negotiate, but to verify. a guy comes walking into your embassy in Pakistan and says, "I know where Bin Laden is," you're not just going to go, "Okay, great, we'll go start the mission."
But if you have the exact location, then can a drone just fly over a couple times?
probably-
Oh, the tall guy, because there's not a lot of tall guys in Pakistan.
You
There
probably
he
wouldn't
is.
want to do that without some verification, DNA verification.
Still a year
And
is
that
a
may
long
actually
time.
speak, Rick, to answer your question. You may get a walk-in asset who tells you. You may actually still need, whether we call it torture or intensified interrogation,
verify
a
it.
different kind to verify
Could
it.
be.
It turns out the fight against terror is never a one-note deal, and probably you need all of these things. The interesting thing about this story, and I remain really skeptical, because when you do a conspiracy theory, everything always fits because it has to, because you're the author of it. Doesn't mean everything is wrong, but it turns out, I think what's really unnerving here is which is worse? That we need the ISI, Pakistan's highest level intelligence organization, to help us, or that they don't help us and they're supposed to be our ally. And I think that's the nub of this story,
Well, that
is
was
that
actually
one
my
way or
favorite part
another,
of the
we
story.
have a real problem here. They're supposed to be our allies, and we know the ISI was connected to the terror attack in Mumbai. We know that they've been passing weapons and technology and information to the Taliban forever. It is their position that using Islamic militants to manage their borders and to export conflict on the other side of their borders to keep stability inside their borders, that's been their stock in trade for years. And I think that's really the complicated issue is, the old adage in that region that the enemy of my enemy is my friend is not always true. Sometimes the enemy of my enemy is my enemy.
Brett, I'd be curious to hear why you're skeptical of somebody like Seymour Hersh, who has broken so many. Oh no, you're
Why
laughing, but
He's
somebody's.
actually a really serious
He
journalist.
has been a magnificent journalist. He surfaced the My Lai story and has amazing moments. He also peddled this story no less than 2 and probably 3 times to his editors at the New Yorker, and they didn't want it.
Right.
And David Remnick is a friend of his and a supporter of his for years. I think he's a giant in terms of journalism, but giants fall. And I think we have to be aware of this may be a moment of like Greek tragedy, where the hero, because of hubris, is overreaching,
but he certainly
makes a terrible
deserves the
mistake.
respect based on his record to take him seriously. You might be right. It may be the case.
That's how we're talking
you
about
had,
it.
you
It's
had,
worth
ma-
talking
you had
about
made
for
a
sure.
point, but it was so long ago. I forget what it was now. I was going to respond
About our
to it.
relationship with the
Heather,
ISI.
save Rick.
Which
Well,
one?
The ISI.
Oh, the ISI. Yeah. To me,
See, I'm
the
paying
most
attention.
the most interesting thing in the story was the suggestion that we're actually much closer to the ISI and the Pakistanis than we tend to believe, and that they actually go to some trouble to create public tiffs for show.
Right.
Well, I mean, and this just shows how much we don't know. What goes on behind closed doors, what goes on with regard to the intelligence and all branches of government. And it's a little bit scary, and yet, we were talking about this before the show. Do you really want to know it all? And should we know it all? Do we have to know it all?
I want to get your thoughts also, since you weren't here last night, on the Bin Laden burial, so to speak. No photos. There's supposed to be an imam present,
yeah.
correct? And was not. Why didn't we take I mean, you can do it pretty easily, right? Up there it goes into the water, and that's it. I mean, I know we don't want to anger the Islamic world, but give me some kind of evidence.
Well, I think like anything else, you start to document someone's funeral. To be clear, there doesn't have to be an imam present. There has to be special preparations of the body, washing and robing and things like that. And as far as I understand,
Exactly.
there
There
was
does have to be an imam
there was
present.
Islamic clergy represented. I don't know what the story is, but there was supervision, and it was, we're told, done. It wasn't documented. Do I think that was smart? Probably not. Do I think it was well-intentioned? Probably, because I think they're not looking to make a spectacle of what they were trying to do with maximum integrity, even though it's a terrible enemy.
It's so hard to believe. It's so hard to believe that someone wouldn't take a picture. And then there's a Vanity Fair article that describes the photographs, but no one ever actually saw them. And then Eric Wemple's reporting that there was some misleading as to whether those photographs ever really happened. I mean, there's definitely a lot of things that would sort of raise the flag of a conspiracy theory
It's a
here.
shame there isn't a grassy knoll on a
Right,
ship.
exactly.
Because
Thank
it's
you.
kind of getting there at this
Exactly,
point. You had mentioned that last night. This could be the JFK
Well,
of
you know,
our
look,
generation.
it's interesting. It is because again, I do keep coming back to Seymour Hersh, and yes, he may have jumped off the rails, but a guy with his history and his track record, I give a lot of credence to until I know. You're right about David Remnick. He's a great editor, and he did not want this story, but
I think there's a germ of truth.
all we know is the first thing that's come out backs him up.
We'll see. Legacy is at stake, that's for sure. Coming up next, Democrats are vetoing the president's trade agreement, and you'll never guess who's standing by his side. Plus, Carly Fiorina says she knows all about the economy. We discuss that. Stay right there. We'll be right back.